Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 652, and today's date is April 27th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Government Will Use Out-of-Control Protests to Declare Martial Law. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece is battling to confiscate as much money as they possibly can because we know there's a payment coming up and it is a large sum. So they have soft capital controls in effect right now, and they have hard capital controls in effect where they're going after those people who haven't paid their debts, their taxes, and they're basically confiscating their bank accounts. And what's very interesting about all this is that they're trying to raise up around 2.5 billion euros in funding, and this will carry them through the end of May. But according to initial reports here, the limits of what they're doing will only raise about 500 to 600 million euros in funds that they need. Not nearly enough to cover the 1 billion euros in Greek payments due to the IMF. And what's happening here is the Central Union of Municipalities and Commodities of Greece held a meeting in which it said that while it declares the support for the national negotiating effort, it would not transfer any of those confiscated funds to the Bank of Greece. So it looks like Greece is having a world of trouble right now. They're trying to gather as many funds as they possibly can to make that payment, and at this point in time it does not seem like they're going to be able to do this. And again, we have to remember they might just end up pivoting right to Russia to help them out or do something, or they might just leave the euro and they have the drachma already designed, ready to go, just sitting there, and they might just write off the debt and say, listen, we cannot do this. We default. And we have to remember, the banking community has already set up special committees to say this is not a default and we don't have to make any payments on the credit swap defaults. Derivatives, we're good to go. And they're already preparing themselves to basically just ignore the entire situation. And we know that if Greece does default and decides to go on its own, other nations are going to say, you know something, we should just do the same thing. Italy's going to see this, France is going to see this, Spain is going to see this, and the rest of the Eurozone. And again, this is going to be a domino effect which is going to spread across Europe. Here in the United States, what are we seeing? Well, the economy here is not getting better whatsoever. It is getting worse. The Dallas Fed manufacturing outlook had collapsed in the last 4 months, and guess what? And it is down for 6 months in a row right now. This is the longest losing streak in history, and April did not disappoint. Against expectations of about negative 12, Dallas prints at a negative 16, the fifth large miss in a row. New order growth rates slowing further. And we're seeing this all throughout the country at this point. We're seeing that real estate is going nowhere. We see that the unemployment rate is completely manipulated and made up. We see the stock market is completely manipulated. Companies aren't even producing revenue. Their earnings are terrible. They're laying off people, buying back their stocks. Actually, the number of companies beating revenue estimates hits its lowest level in 2 years. More and more of these companies are laying off employees. I mean, we saw Procter & Gamble going all the way back to the beginning of this year. We saw Microsoft, Macy's, Target, a lot of stores closing. We see Unisys now laying off about 1,800 people. And people are having a very rough time finding work. And as more and more people get laid off, it gets harder and harder because there are less jobs. Yes, there are part-time jobs, but again, if you were making 80, 90, 100,000 and you're out there trying to find that same job and you have a certain level of payments that you make each month for your home, for your car, for your insurance. This is very hard to keep up. And this is why we see foreclosures increasing. This is why we see delinquencies on automobiles. And this is why the government, the central bankers, are using every single type of program to drag anyone that has a heartbeat in to make a loan. And I'm not talking about a purchase in cash. They want them to take out loans. This is how their system operates. Their product is debt. The central bank system, their product is debt. And this is why we see debt being pushed around the globe. We see 1 in 5 families right now in the U.S., no one works. 20% of American families in 2014, according to the data released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, no one in the family worked. And I'm going to say this is much, much higher. And again, they're only counting those people that worked like over 15 hours or so. Many people have side jobs. Many people are working for cash. They don't claim it. Many people are just trying to get by. And we have to remember, a lot of people are still looking for work. They're sending out resumes. They're getting no response back. And this is making it harder and harder for families to make it. We see the manufacturing industry here in the United States is crumbling and falling apart. The people, since they have no jobs, are getting laid off. No one in the family's working. They're not going out to retail and purchasing. I mean, this is quite evident. Retail stores are closing. They're laying off more people. Those people can't find jobs. It's a cascading effect which just brings everything down. And since no one's out there finding these jobs, they're not working, they're not spending in retail, they're not going out and purchasing the big ticket items like a house or so. And manufacturing is suffering because if the stores don't need the products, the manufacturers don't have to produce. If the manufacturers don't have to produce, they don't need the raw material. And this is why we see the Baltic Dry Index is hovering around 600 points. It moves down to 590, moves back up to 600, and it fluctuates. And every time we see it move up, it's because of things like this, where the Baltic Index edged higher on Friday because of increased rates for bigger vessels that had nothing to do with manufacturing whatsoever. All they did was increase the rates, and it moved up like a point or two. And basically, the Baltic Dry Index is a great indicator to see where we are. I mean, this is on raw material that is shipped all over the world. It's kind of protected by the U.S. government and speculators manipulating the numbers. And this tells us how the world economy is doing right now. Right now, it is suffering. And it's not improving. If we go back a year, 2 years, 3 years, the Baltic Dry Index was around 1,000 points, around 1,500 points. I don't remember the last time it's been this low for such a long time. And it looks like it's not improving whatsoever. Out in Japan, Fitch Rating has lowered Japan's credit rating as the country continues to wrestle with staggering debt. The country eventually has to boost taxes to cover rising costs, but there's a problem with this. They tried to raise taxes. They raised the sales taxes, and guess what? It hurt the consumer. Business spending dropped, and the economy, the Japanese economy, slipped into recession. Fitch downgraded them from an A+ to an A. All of these countries, they're falling apart. I mean, everyone goes, oh, we should just increase taxes. Think about it. If you're making a certain number of dollars, you're bringing it in each month, and someone says, listen, just give me, 500 of that. You don't mind, right? And if that dollar amount that you're bringing in only lasts you 21 days, what are the repercussions of someone taking an additional $500 from you? You cannot survive. That's what a tax is. If you add additional taxes on products, people say, you know what? It's out of my price range. I don't want to purchase it. If you increase income tax, what happens? People say, I'll pay it, but it's going to affect what I purchase in stores. if I purchase a new car, and this is what we're seeing, and this is why Japan is having a huge, huge problem. Their country is doomed. Europe is doomed. The United States is doomed. And all they're doing is they're keeping the illusion alive that everything is perfectly fine. There's a study out of Princeton. They're saying that U.S. is no longer a democracy. The findings of the recent Princeton research study show that the economic elites and organized groups have a substantial influence on the policy of the U.S. government, while groups representing the interests of the mass Americans, as well as ordinary citizens, have little or no influence on politics. Well, this is quite evident because we saw Obama during the election saying, yes, he has a memorandum, and he's going to allow the immigrants, the illegal aliens, I should say, come over the border, and none of the agencies will touch them. Now, he didn't push the memorandum through during the elections because the people wouldn't agree with that, and he knows that. He doesn't care. This is why he waited for after the elections. When people are out there saying, hey, listen, we don't want the Patriot Act, we don't want you spying on us, they do the actual opposite. They do not care what the people say. The main conclusion of the study, they say Americans actually have little opportunity to influence policies pursued by the U.S. government. I completely agree with that. The findings are also important in terms of foreign policy. In case of military conflicts or political confrontation with Russia, the U.S. government does not represent the interests of the American people, but those of business and political elites. We are in a fascist country. This is not a democracy anymore. It's an illusion to make you think you are in a democracy. You are not. The corporations, the central bank, they run the country. They do not care what the people say whatsoever. And we know for a fact that the U.S. government is looking for that special opportunity to declare martial law on the people. And we see in Baltimore, which resembled a war zone as protests over the death of Freddie Gray turned very violent. One witness reported watching the streets around him and his friend turn into madness as they left a baseball game between the Boston Red Sox and the Baltimore Orioles. Car windows were smashed, stores were robbed, chairs were thrown, and a large number of random bystanders were attacked. Local news captured live footage of a man throwing a flaming trash can at the police line. Why is all this happening? Well, a lot of it's ginned up by the Black Panther Party and the new leader, Malik Shabazz, which is basically part of a Washington-based CIA organization to push their agenda to get the people all riled up, and they want protests. They tried it in Ferguson. The government is trying to get this, and they want it to spread across the country so they can declare martial law on the people, suspend the Constitution, to become a full fascist society. This is what they're trying to do, and they want complete control. The mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, admitted in a press conference that she gave instructions for police to protect protesters, including those who wished to destroy, and to give them some space. Now, keep in mind that Baltimore told people they needed to stay in a ballpark because they couldn't control the protesters. So they illegally detained law-abiding citizens in order to give space to those who wanted to destroy Baltimore. And who are these people? Well, there's agent provocateurs in the group, got people going. We saw this way back in Ferguson when people actually said, wait a minute, you're undercover police. And those are the people that were throwing rocks, chairs into businesses to get the other people all riled up. We're seeing the same thing occur again. Right now, there are warnings all over the place. Law enforcement authorities in Baltimore have issued a dire warning. Watch out, gang members are coming for you. Law enforcement agencies should take appropriate precautions to ensure the safety of their officers. The department emailed messages read, "The Baltimore Police Department Criminal Intelligence Unit has received credible information that members of various gangs, including the Black Guerrilla Family, Bloods, and the Crips, have entered into a partnership to take out law enforcement." We can see where this is headed. This is why the government wants control of the police forces to nationalize them. This is why the police have been given tanks, machine guns, fatigues, spy equipment, because they're getting ready for these type of situations. And what they're doing in Baltimore right now, they're trying to fan the flame to get this to spread across the country. If you notice, this has started as we're moving into May. And we know that Jade Helm is coming during the summer months. If they can get this fanned up over the next month or two, we can see how this all fits together. And they're continually trying to push this as hard as they possibly can. They didn't get it to work in Ferguson, so they try in many different areas, and they will continually do this until they get something started. Now, we all understand the government right now uses fear. They control the people. They tell us there's terrorists out there. And they continually do this because they're trying to get rid of everyone's rights. They basically published law after law to limit the number of weapons or ammunition. They take away your right to free speech. They're cracking down, and they're allowing the government police forces to search each person, which violates the Fourth Amendment. And they're continually doing this. This is nonstop. But what's very interesting about this, and we knew this for a long time, is that the U.S. government declassified to the New York Times a 2009 report concerning the mass surveillance program initiated in 2001 by former President George W. Bush. The full report was issued to the newspaper on April 24th following a Freedom of Information Act request. The report details a program called Stellar Wind, a joint project produced 6 years ago by the Inspector General of the Justice Department, Pentagon, CIA, NSA, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Guess what? All of this spying on the American people, it did absolutely nothing. Stellar Wind did not prove useful, as only 1.2% of the tips between 2001 and 2004 are said to have significantly contributed to identifying a terrorist, deporting a terrorist suspect from the country, or developing an informant about terrorists. During the next 2 years, between 2004 and 2006, not one lead from the warrantless wiretapping practice of Stellar Wind proved useful to U.S. intelligence and law enforcement agencies, the report said. Not very surprising whatsoever, because we know the government, 94% of the time, they are the terrorists. They're the ones who set it up. They're the ones who create the false flag event, and they're the ones who control the situation. Of course they can't find anything spying on the American people. That wasn't the purpose of the spying. The spying was to spy on government officials, judges, and the American people, so they knew what was going on, what were they thinking, who they were in contact with, what purchases were they making, what groups they were meeting with, and all of this was trying to be siphoned up to a main database so it can be correlated, and they can search on it to find out what everyone is doing. That's what the real priority of the program was. And we understand from everything that we've been seeing, like TSA in the airport patting you down, has never stopped a terrorist. DHS, their early alert system, never has any alerts. Even during the Boston bombing, it was blank. Why? Because it was a government operation. The government uses terrorism to scare the people into doing things they normally wouldn't do. And what are those things? One of them is, yes, we will give up some of our rights to feel protected. The other thing is, yes, we will vote on these bills that will take more of our rights away. Oh, yes, we will go to war because we need to get the terrorists. This is what it's used for, because normally an everyday American would not agree to this. So they need to use these types of tactics. I talked about how the White House has a system to shut down the cell phone network. And they also have a kill switch on all iPhones, Android phones. It's already implemented. It's already in the software, or maybe even the hardware, because they know when certain events occur, they want to shut down the network. And the White House now is fighting against the power to shut down the cell phone network. They want to keep it. They say they need it. I mean, during the Bay Area Rapid Transit System to silent dissent in 2011, they used the kill switch to shut off all cell phone services in several stations. In Boston bombing, they did the same exact thing. The thing they didn't realize was that people were still able to take pictures, and once the cell phone system was turned back on, all those pictures were transmitted. And now they took it a step further. They will shut down the network, and they will just shut down your phone. Why? Because they need to control the false flag event. This is why all of this is put into place. Think about this for a second. Why would the government shut down the cell network? Now, of course, they're using the excuse as well. If somebody has a cell activated bomb, we don't want that to go off by accident. Well, I hate to say it. Does your phone ring by accident when you make a call to somebody else? No, it doesn't. Each one is on its own frequency signal directed to your phone using a SIM card with a string of digits. The reason why they want to shut this down is because they don't want people communicating and pushing this up to the internet to debunk what they're trying to do. That's it. It's called control. Now, we've been talking about Japan and how Abe wants to change the Constitution, basically change what's in Article 9, and make Japan no longer a pacifist nation where they can go ahead and join in on the battles, be the aggressor. And we see there was a meeting with Secretary of State John Kerry, Defense Secretary Ashton Carter, and Japanese officials. It appears we have now been shown the end game, and it seems that all of this that we talked about is coming true. Japan's military is going to take more of an assertive role. And we knew this was coming, and this is why we were reporting on it over and over and over the last year. Because as we moved down and got closer and closer to the end game, all the pieces had to be in alignment. And Japan needs to have this change so they can be more assertive, because the U.S. is going to need them. And this completes the encircling of China. So basically, Japan and the U.S. are going to bolster their alliance for the first time in 18 years. The revisions boost Japan's role in missile defense, minesweeping, and ship inspections amid growing Chinese assertiveness. Again, we have to remember, it's all about provoking the other country. The new arrangements will also allow Japan to dispatch its armed forces beyond the region for logistical backup of U.S. military global operations in distant areas, including the Middle East. U.S.-Japan agree to give Japan's self-defense force more ambitious global role. U.S. and Japan reaffirm that the Senkaku Islands are under the Japanese administration. So basically, they're a non-pacifist nation. They're an aggressor. And now they're putting out there that, hey, the Senkaku Islands, they're under Japanese administration. And of course, they're saying this to China. Provoking. Washington now wants Abe to agree to a collective defense with NATO, which would see Japan strike back at an enemy that attacks the United States. The inverse has been true for 7 decades right now. And we have to remember with NATO, if you attack one NATO nation, all the nations go to war. Just remember that. The United States is also ready to use all military options, including nuclear weapons, to defend its Japanese ally. The U.S. Navy base Yokosuka will station more ballistic missile defense warships by 2017 and receive an advanced nuclear-powered supercarrier in 2015. And we have to remember, the U.S. Defense Department is going to locate 60% of its military fleet to the Pacific Indian Ocean with the newest and most capable weapons going first to the Asia-Pacific region. They are getting ready for World War III. This is why we see the military assets being shifted, deals being made. Japan, which again created its first war ship since World War II, and they're creating some more. This is why they want to move this base to a different region of Japan to bring in more sophisticated weapons. We are seeing it happen right now. We talked about this in the past, and here it is today. It's all coming clear. And basically, what they're going to do is they're going to end up provoking China, just like they're provoking Russia in Eastern Europe. I mean, look at the Ukraine situation. I mean, there was a coup d'etat. They spent about $5 billion there. And the U.S., the corporate media, the European news, they were all out there saying, oh, look, Yanukovych, his police force, they're firing on the people. Oh my God, this is terrible. They have snipers. Well, guess what? Yes, the U.S. government, the corporate media, the European corporate media, the European governments, they all lied once again. I mean, we knew this, but the truth comes out later on. And of course, when it comes out later on, it seems like nobody cares anymore. We need to care. The snipers shooting indiscriminately at police and protesters during the Maidan Revolution were trained in Poland. The Maidan was also their operation. The CIA was involved in this. And basically, the snipers who shot on the 40 demonstrators and 20 police officers, they were there to provoke the riots. And a Polish member of the European Parliament has acknowledged that the Maidan snipers were trained in Poland and not in Russia. Everyone thought, oh, this is Russia in there, this is Yanukovych in there, they're firing on the people. Actually, it wasn't true. It was Poland, it was the United States, it was the CIA to push their agenda. And look at Ukraine today after the coup d'etat. The people are suffering. They can't take it anymore. The entire economy is collapsing. We see 1,000 people right now are rallying. This happened in April, on the 22nd of April, outside the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, condemning the war in eastern Ukraine. The signs that they were holding up said, USA, thanks for the poverty, and we are not cattle. Police were arresting people, but again, this is not shown on the corporate media. They don't want you to see this. They don't want you to see the people saying, you know something, we're upset. I wouldn't be surprised if these crowds get bigger. I think a lot of people are afraid. They're afraid of the Ukrainian government. They're afraid that they'll come down hard on them. They'll be arrested. They might be tortured. And you have to remember, the U.S. government central bankers, they are the ones who are directing all of this. Keep this in mind about what's going to happen here in the United States. The Ukraine Prime Minister is out there, Yatsenyuk. He's saying that Kiev did not receive $3 billion in taxes from Ukraine's eastern conflict-torn region of Donbass. But we have to remember there's a humanitarian crisis going on in this region. Ukraine Parliament is going to introduce a 1.5% military tax, and Kiev stopped making social benefit payments to the people of Donetsk. They have a blockade right now. Nothing can go in and out, and they want to collect taxes on the people. Think about what they're saying here and what the central bankers are looking to do. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the humanitarian situation. They don't care if they're paying them. They don't care if they're suffering. They want their taxes. They want to set up the banking system in this region. No mention of feeding the people, taking care of the people, because the central bankers are not loyal to any government, to any people. They are only loyal to themselves. If they have to have you, your cousin, your brother, your sister, your father, anyone go to war, they will do it. They don't care about you. If you die, they don't care. All they care is about maintaining control and pushing out debt and robbing each one of these countries of their natural resources, making them richer and richer, and controlling the people as time goes on. That's all they care about. We can see that the Minsk II agreements are completely falling apart. I mean, they had an agreement where Lugansk and Donetsk were supposed to be involved in the constitutional reform, and guess what? Ukraine is completely leaving them out. They are modifying and creating the constitutional reforms without them whatsoever. Can you imagine if the U.S. Constitution was created without the people, and it was just the government that was creating it? Well, it would be one-sided. It would be for the government and not for the people of those regions. So basically, they're violating the Minsk II agreement once again. Hundreds and hundreds of violations, ceasefire violations. They're doing whatever they possibly can because, as we know, they're getting ready for a major, major offensive. We see Poroshenko right now is calling on the EU to grant Ukraine membership in the bloc. And again, the EU is looking at the situation and saying, listen, we don't want another country like Italy, Spain, Greece, because Ukraine is hurting right now economically, and it would make it worse if it entered the EU. Maybe 5 years down the line, but at this point in time, all you have is the western portion of Ukraine. You don't have the southeast. You don't have Crimea. And right now, we don't see this happening. We see Yatsenyuk. He is out there saying that Ukraine has no plans on postponing the term for establishing a free trade zone with the European Union. This is all they care about. Not that they're destroying people's lives. All they care about is their control, is their money, is their central banking system. That's all they care about. They care about nothing else. And as time goes on, the people are going to get sick and tired of this. The economy is going to collapse, and they're going to have protests that are going to turn into riots, and they will not be able to control this. And they know this, and this is why they're getting prepared for a major, major offensive coming very, very soon. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens late spring to early summer. Now, as we know, in Ukraine after the coup d'etat, we had Joe Biden bring his son in. He was put on the board of directors of the gas company. We know that John Kerry had his friend in college also join the board. And we can see that right now Ukraine wants to see European partners and friends among shareholders of the domestic gas transportation system. And this is coming from who again? Yatsenyuk, who's a central banker of Ukraine, who the United States put into place. And again, they're leaving out Russia. They do not want Russia stepping in whatsoever. They're going to look towards the United States. They're going to look towards the European nations. And we can see what they're doing right now. They're taking control of the resources in Ukraine. The United States right now, through another $1 billion worth of loan guarantees towards Ukraine. Again, they need this. They are collapsing. And they need this so they can go ahead and push their offensive against the southeastern area. And we can see right now that Ukraine is continually shelling the southeastern people. And of course, the southeastern militias are firing back. And of course, Ukraine comes out and says, oh my God, we're being fired upon. We need peacekeepers in the southeastern region because all of a sudden they're firing on us. No, Ukraine fired upon the southeastern people, and they're defending themselves. They left that first part out. And we know why they want the peacekeepers in there, because there's a bill that will declare martial law in the Donbass region. And this is what they really want to happen. You know right now that they're going to do whatever they possibly can to push a false flag event and make it look like the southeastern people have attacked Kiev. Because you have to remember, Poroshenko said, we will not mount an offensive on the southeastern people. But if they attack us, then all bets are off. And this is the setup. We see the OSCE inspectors right now are being harassed by Kiev troops and volunteer battalions. They're asking them questions and threatening their lives like, what's your nationality? Where are you going? They're doing illegal searches. And such actions by the Ukrainian forces run contrary to Kiev's obligations to ensure safety and freedom of movement of the OSCE monitors overseeing the implementation of the Minsk peace deal and UN Security Council Resolution 2202. And of course they're doing this because they don't want the OSCE going to certain areas. They keep them contained. They keep them off balance. Now, of course, we've been hearing a lot about the Russia buildup. They're building up the armed forces on the border with Ukraine. There's soldiers inside Ukraine. Missiles are being placed inside Ukraine. And of course, there's no satellite imagery. There's no photos. And if there is a photo, like the Buk missile system, which one of the senators was out there showing, basically it was the Buk missile system from last year. And he's showing it today, making it seem like, oh yeah, see, they have this system. But it was from last year on the Ukrainian side. I mean, they just show these photos and they're just lying to the people. And we see right now American and Norwegian specialists will fly over the territory of Russia under the Treaty of the Open Skies between April 27th and April 30th. They've flown over the region many, many times. And guess what they've seen? No Russian troop buildup. During the time period when they're saying that Russia had troops, they were bringing tanks over the border. An NBC crew drove 1,200 miles up and down the border, and guess what they saw? Absolutely nothing. If you notice, they never give a satellite image of what's going on, and you know they have the satellites right above that take clear HD, three-dimensional, beautiful, colorful pictures, and we haven't seen one of them. So basically, Norwegian and the Americans with the Russians, they're going to be flying an AN-30 plane. It is not equipped with any weapons whatsoever. It's only equipped with technology to observe on what is going on. That is it. And they will see there is absolutely nothing going on. France right now, it looks like they might have plans to pay back costs for the Mistral helicopter carriers ordered by Russia. If they're not delivered, they're going to be returning about 800 million euros and paying compensation for other expenses totaling about 300 million euros. And Paris is expected to fund the compensation from about $2 billion worth of euros that Poland will pay to buy these ships. So it looks like Poland, along with the U.S., is saying, okay, we will give the funds to purchase this to get you out of the deal with Russia. But nothing's been finalized yet, and we'll see how this works out. Now, out in Yemen, we understand the situation is getting worse. The new Operation Hope, or what I like to call Operation Restore the Puppet Government, is now being pushed forward, which is basically the same thing they were doing before, bombing the Houthis. Nothing's changed whatsoever. But as we saw, the United States basically just left the U.S. citizens in Yemen. They had ships right off the coast. They could have flown in, rescued them, removed them, but they didn't. Instead, they made a lot of excuses. They were giving them directions. They were giving them information. But the Russians came in and they rescued foreign nationals from Yemen. A lot of them were from the U.S. and many other places. So right now, Russia has rescued about 1,700 foreign nationals. America rescued 0. I mean, America, the superpower, couldn't go in and rescue its own people. Now, there might have been another agenda where they wanted the Houthis to kill some of the people. Of course, the Houthis are not going to do this. What would be the reason for this? But if some of them were to die in the bombing, they would have said, the Houthis killed them, and this is why we need to go to war in Yemen. This is why we need to pass the authorization for war. But let's look at some of the facts. Fact 1. The U.S. doesn't give a damn about its trapped citizens in harm's way. Fact 2. The State Department did nothing to help. It contacted no one on their behalf. Fact 3. It provided no helpful information. It left defenseless U.S. citizens on their own, out of luck. Fact 4. Washington can easily evacuate all U.S. nationals wishing to leave, by air and sea in a few days at most. Fact 5. It could halt all terror bombing to assure no one is in harm's way. Fact 6. Obama could end his latest aggression, killing and injuring hundreds daily, and rescue the people. They did none of this. They just left them. We see Saudi warplanes are pounding the Yemen capital. Nothing has changed whatsoever. The same thing has happened since Operation Decisive Storm. They're continually hitting, but we see the Houthis now are mobilizing for the first time since the end of Decisive Storm. The Houthi militias erected, according to witnesses, new military bases inside the capital. They brought in military forces with tanks and armored military vehicles into the capital. And the situation in Yemen is not going to get better, because we have to remember the goal is always the same. Put in the puppet government, keep the central bank, and put their natural resources on the US dollar. And of course now, like I mentioned over the weekend, the Islamic State is now in Yemen. There's about a dozen or so, and they're showing that they're carrying the AK-47 RPGs. And of course, let's think about this for a second. There's a naval blockade. The Saudis are all on the borders, but there's a dozen Islamic State soldiers that snuck into Yemen to pose for a picture, to show that they were there. This is pure propaganda to push the authorization for war. Because what does the authorization for war say? Wherever the Islamic State is, that is where the United States can go. And this is why they are showing this at this time. We're getting reports that Egypt is preparing a large-scale ground and air assault along the Libyan border to oust the Islamic State group from eastern Libya, because we've seen the Islamic State in Libya. Well, we can see what's really happening here. The people of Libya have seized 11 oil fields and is pumping 200,000 barrels a day to anybody. And guess what? The U.S. government, the central bankers, cannot have this. Now, the U.S. cannot go into Libya. They don't have the authorization for war. So they need the coalition forces to go in. They'll direct the operations, and we can see this is getting prepared. So we have Yemen. The next case is going to be Libya. They will not allow this to continue on, because they lost control of the oil fields and the sale of oil, because most likely they are not selling it using the US dollar. We can see that yesterday a 1,200-man force invaded Syria from Turkey, a forced arm with American M16 rifles, the latest TOW missiles, and advanced Stinger air defense systems. The roads were strewn with burning Syrian tanks, while the Syrian Air Force tries to slow their advance through the city of Idlib and into Syria. The armored brigade that invaded Syria was the first unit trained by the U.S. under the commander of General John Allen. Wait a minute. I thought all of this was to go fight the Islamic State. As soon as they were trained, soon as they were out there, they attacked the Syrian armed forces. They left the Islamic State completely alone. It's all holding true. Their goal is still the same, which we knew. It's to get Assad. Period. The end. The Islamic State is a proxy army for the United States government, Israel, UK, and other nations in the coalition forces. And we can see right now that all of this training and everything they're doing has nothing to do with the Islamic State. It has everything to do with removing Assad. At this point in time, Russia and Syria, they've signed an agreement on combating terrorism. Russia will join Syria right now in the fight against the Islamic State. So we can see what's going on here. Everything is getting ramped up. We're moving into the spring, summer months, and we can see they're definitely getting prepared for something very big in Ukraine, out in the Pacific, in the Middle East with Syria, and we are going to see something major occur. We see the propaganda is continually being pushed. I know I discussed the hack in the White House. We all understand it was not Russia whatsoever. I mean, they're pushing their propaganda to convince everyone these are going to be our enemies. Russia, China, North Korea. And they're not stopping. I mean, think about the timing of all of this. It just so happened at the moment of renewed tensions with Russia, where Russia's building up forces on Ukraine, and all of a sudden the White House got hacked. Another coincidence is that we have these cybersecurity bills in Congress, and they're getting ready to be voted on. Of course, this will remove more of your privacy. Your information will be shared with the government. But all of this is done to push an agenda. Remember back when DHS, they were threatening to cut off their funding in the budget, and they started up all these scare tactics that in the malls of America, they're detecting some chatter and there could be some type of terrorist attack, and as soon as they got their budget, it all disappeared. This is what this is. This is to convince everyone. That's it. Nothing else. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.